Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Guns on Pegs podcast. Today, once again, I have left Chris behind and come on an adventure. He's at Lord's today, so don't feel too sorry for him. As you may have gathered from some of the background noise, I'm not in my house as I usually am for these recordings, but instead I've travelled east from Hampshire, along the south coast to Sussex. And the reason I've come all this way is that our good friends at Weber have helped us to set up a podcast with a man whose work I have admired from afar for quite some time. You might have seen him on Channel 4's Shipwrecked or read his articles in The Times, The Telegraph, The Guardian, The Independent, or read his book, which shares the same name as his Instagram account, which is where I first came across him, and his business, Hunter Gather Cook, also known as Nick Weston. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
George, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you down.
Well, it's very, very nice to be here. This is a pretty amazing location. Perhaps we'll start off just by giving a quick atmosphere, scene-setting description of the space we're in at the minute.
So currently we are sat in a 200-year-old threshing barn. So basically this thing was built 5 years after the Battle of Waterloo. So you can see, if you look up there, you've got so basically a threshing barn has like a smaller entrance and a big outgoing entrance into the walled garden. So you can see where there used to be an archway over there. So when we first came here, Hunter Gather Cook's been through many phases. It all started, thanks for talking about Shipwreck, by the way. That's something I like to keep quiet. A wonderful experience, and I met a very good friend of mine now, Rowan, on there, who we work together with Yeti now, so it's a lovely thing. But yeah, so it started with doing that, and I realised that I had a passion for teaching people how to do things. So I was out there as a survival expert, which Channel 4 labelled me as. But I found seeing people that had no idea how to make fire from scratch, catch crabs, fishing. We were making fishing line out of dental floss, things like that. I was nicking girls' Kirby grips to make fishing hooks and sharpening them up on a stone. So I realised, I was I quite enjoy seeing them thrive and actually become good at these things.
Competent and generating or learning new skills and being able to fend for themselves a bit.
That's the thing. So when I came back from that, I came back to London. I've been working as an event chef. I got back into it, and suddenly you start looking at ways of getting out of doing that. So you're I'm from Sussex originally, or grew up on Ashdown Forest, and I was I've always done a lot of, fly fishing is my absolute passion. But shooting as well, love doing that, love a bit of deer stalking. So it's one of those things I was well, how could I maybe make this into a thing? And I just got fed up with London. It was recession driven. I was I can't afford to live up here. So I was right, I'm going to move back to Sussex. I'm going to find a bit of land, which is a really hard thing to do. Yeah. But if you know quite a few farmers, that you've grown up with, you can be can I build a tree house in one of your woods and live off the land for 6 months? And they turn around to you and go, yeah, I'd be interested to see how that's going to turn out.
So that was the first iteration of this whole project. Then was just living alone in a tree house in the woods. Very
much so. But I was doing when I was in London, I was a bit bored with work. I was doing a blog which was called Hunter Gather Cook, and it was the way I'm quite heavily dyslexic, so I saw it as hunter, I'm the hunter, and I gather and I cook. Whereas grammatically it should be hunter, gatherer, cook, or hunt, gather, cook. There is a very cool dude who's like my doppelganger in the States called Hank Shaw, who I've been following for years, and we always kind of have a joke about it because he's hunt, gather, cook, whereas I'm hunter, gather, cook. And there's another guy in Bristol who we won't talk about. But which weirdly, people send stuff to him thinking it's me. And it's like, can you send it back to me? He's like, no. But yeah, so through doing that, kind of, you live in a treehouse for 6 months, and weirdly wrote a book about it called The Treehouse Diaries. If you can find one of them, it's like gold dust.
Oh, they're rare books now, are they?
Very rare books. I mean, they only did like 6,000 copies, and I've never seen a royalty from it, so I don't think I ever will. But from doing that, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start this thing, and I just called it after the blog, like that I was doing, and I just called it Hunter Gather Cook, and then from there, found a piece of land that we were kind of renting, like not about half an hour from where we are now. And had a very simple kind of lean-to sort of setup, and we kind of started doing like teaching people how to do like kind of deer butchery, rabbit butchery. And previously I'd never really been into deer butchery, but then you meet a lot of people and you then learn from them, and then you devise your own way about how to take things apart.
Yeah, so maybe you can just expand a little bit on the different strands of the business. So you run courses for people, for members of the public and corporate groups and that kind of stuff. And then you also kind of go on the road a bit, don't you?
Yeah, so we kind of, it's diversified a lot. I mean, we did from the start, when you start something like this, you kind of spread yourself as wide as you can, and you do like, we'll do like kids bushcrafty days and stuff like that. Fairly quickly, I mean, I have a 7-year-old. Fairly quickly, you realise actually you don't want to work with children.
Yes.
And or animals. But I was like actually no, let's refine it a bit more, and the kind of, you start bringing in kind of chefs and stuff like that, and you go, okay, well, let's make this into a thing. I mean, all the guys here know that I'm mainly logistics, so I put everything together. They help me execute all of that. So gradually over the years, it changed from being kind of like, okay, we're just going to do like courses pretty much every weekend throughout the year. Then you kind of start doing festivals. So Wilderness Festival is one we've been doing for like, I think this is our 10th year doing it. So we do like crayfish trapping, deer butchery and foraging. And then we do like also like a kind of, after they've done their 2-hour course, they come back to our woodland kitchen, which we build over the space of a week, and then they do, they have canapes, wild cocktails, all the rest of it, and it's brilliant working with the botanist dudes. I think a quick cheers.
Well, I was going to say, so a regular feature of our podcast is the segment that we call "What's That You're Drinking?" Normally, we'd go around the group and we'd each talk about what we're drinking, but since you made the drinks, maybe you could just tell us what's in the glass.
So we've got a bit of Moroccan mint from the garden, bit of lime, some of the lovely botanist gin, and a bit of fever tree. I mean, got to keep you guys refreshed.
Tell me a little bit about botanist gin.
So it's made from 22 different botanicals up on the lovely island of Isla. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Isla's well known for its whiskey.
Yes.
So you got your Lagavulins, you got your Ardbeg.
Well, it's a bit of a running gag on the podcast that 9 times out of 10 I'm drinking whiskey on the podcast. So it's nice to have a little change, but I'm very familiar with those Isla whiskies.
There is a bottle of Brooklady over there.
Well, I have got to drive back to Winchester later, so I probably take it a little bit easy. But it's a very nice gin and tonic, and the mint's a really lovely touch in it, I think.
That's why I made you a G&T. Rather than just like, here's a dram.
I wouldn't have complained.
But I say it's like, over the years, and it's been a bizarre thing that I've never had with what we do at Hunter Gather Cook, like a plan with it. I mean, I've had a kind of plan, but I think my dyslexic brain doesn't really compute a 5-year plan. So it's kind of, it just evolves and you see what happens and comes along.
And you've tried all these different things, and some things worked, and some things have worked, but you don't want to keep doing them. And
Well, but that's the thing, and it's like, and you moving into like doing corporate stuff. Like we have like quite a lot of companies come down here. Like we've got a job for Jägermeister coming up, who've been down before. We've got, obviously the botanist. They come down. We do academies for them, so we teach about wild cocktails and botanicals. But even kind of random stuff like Yeti, working with them and becoming an ambassador for them, I never even thought about. Even working like with Weber, I never thought, like when I was sat in my treehouse going, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Like I kind of know what I want to do, but how
do you make that happen?
Yeah, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
So you basically, it's like jumping off a cliff and hoping for a soft landing. And you just go, you know what, if I do something to the best of my ability and, you know, find the right people to execute it, then it might work out.
So I guess there's two main strands to what you do in terms of the actual, what's the word for it? The actual concept. One of those is wild food, and the other is cooking with fire, barbecue, if you want to call it that, and I suppose game, which is obviously where the Guns on Pegs angle comes in. But we've talked about it a little bit before on the podcast and in various articles that we've put out. There is something inherently perfect about that combination of game and wild food. Maybe you could just... So what I'm really interested to know is, did the cooking with fire lead to cooking with game, or did cooking with game lead to cooking on fire?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, the way that I've always thought about it is there's this like wonderful circle that exists in nature. So if you're going to be shooting game, like be it rabbits, deer, they all live in like the great outdoors. Yeah. You know, this is wild food we're talking about. They also eat lots of, all the plants that are around them. So you've suddenly got this kind of like, okay, well, my food is eating my other food, and then they live in the woods or around the woods, and you're like, okay, well, then you cook on them. Well, you cook.
So it's almost a sort of a terroir thing, to use a...
Very much so.
It's about localism as much as it is about that.
Yeah, and we've also been like, throughout the years, it's got better and better, like as of where we saw stuff. So, for example, with the treehouse site we had, we would always use like what wood was grown there, and we'd get it from the farm. So we'd be getting hornbeam, oak, and a bit of silver birch. Like that's our kind of cooking style. Yeah. That's what we'd be using to fuel our fires. Whereas here, we're in the South Downs. So, oi, Cleo, no, shut.
So speaking of local food, that is one of your truffle hounds you were telling me earlier.
Yeah, so we got 2 of them. I'm surprised the other one's not kicked off. But yeah, 2 Norfolk / Jack Russell Terriers, which are from Firle, which is the estate we're on. But yeah, this one's a bit of a wally, whereas she's only 1, whereas B's like 9. She's like seasoned truffle hound. So, but that's another thing I never thought I'd get into. But when you find out that on the South Downs there are truffles, yeah, you're suddenly like, okay, I'm going to get a dog. I've never had dogs before. Train it and then see what happens.
I've read a bit about training truffle hounds before. I'm intrigued to know how you went about it, because I've heard one technique and I've never quite believed it. So you tell me what you did, and then I'll tell you if it's the same one that I've heard.
So, I mean, I was very fortunate that I did a piece for the Independent, I think it was, and when I first heard it, I had to do a foraging article for them, and I heard in the local pub, which is always the best place for information, that you do get truffles in Sussex. So I was like, okay. So I kind of started looking into it, and this name popped up online, this lovely woman called Melissa Waddingham. And I was like, I got in touch with her and I said, look, I've got to do this. I'd love to learn about this. This is kind of what I do. I do kind of foraging and stuff like that. Would you be up for it? And she was like, yeah, cool. So she took me out and with her dogs who like she's trained and she was quite helpful when it came to actually training my dogs. Although it's very simple with dogs and training them to do stuff, I think. Gun dogs, probably a lot more. I tend to, with these two, is keeping them away from sheep and not harassing them and stuff like that. But it was literally cotton wool pad, bit of truffle oil on it, hide it round flaps of carpet in the house, and then go on, look for it. And then when they find it, you go, well done, give them a treat. Right, go on, look for it, working. And those are the two cool signs for these two. I reckon if B, I don't know where B is, but if she came in here and I gave her a stiff truffle oil and went working, she'd start walking around the barn going.
Amazing. So that's not quite the technique that I'd heard of, which is I read.
What did you do?
Well, I haven't got a truffle hound, but I read that the way that some people do it is to paint truffle oil onto the mother's teats when they're a puppy, and then the puppy obviously associates that smell with, I guess, reward. So it's exactly the same. It's the same concept, but a different sort of technique.
That is the other one. But there is one of the guys who works for me, Dave, who's been with us from the beginning. He sadly his dog Floyd passed away. Who was a lovely border terrier, but he taught his dog to do truffling. He basically put truffle on a tennis ball and would go fetch, and his dog became insanely good at finding tennis balls anywhere,
but not truffle.
No, not truffles, but tennis balls everywhere. But that's the thing, that there's kind of a lot of, I think it's really just if you get them as a puppy and you ingrain that thing into them, they're never going to forget that.
Yeah, I think we recently found my family farms on the South Downs as well, just outside Winchester, and somebody recently turned up with an Italian truffle hound and found truffles in one of our woods. So my parents have got Dachshunds, and they need to get to work, basically, is my strong feeling about it.
I was saying that, typically your truffle hounds are your Lagottos, Labradors or Spaniels. I mean, terriers, not so much.
Yeah.
But no, Bee's had quite a bit of airtime. She's been on Jamie and Jimmy's Friday Night Feast doing truffling. I think she's been on a couple of BBC reports, and Made in Chelsea, which we don't tend to talk about because it's a bit embarrassing, but she doesn't know.
But going back to this kind of, the synergy between game and cooking on flame and that kind of thing. I mean, compared to some of the highfalutin techniques that you hear about chefs using in kitchens these days, it's probably fair to call some of the techniques that you use maybe primitive cooking techniques. But I think you've actually got an academic background in that kind of thing as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so I studied archaeology at Newcastle University, and I realised after my first year of doing it, I was like, I'm never going to go into archaeology from a professional point of view, because you're either a ditch monkey, so you're digging stuff up, but you either, if to progress and go further, you have to do a master's. And I was like, I don't want to be a mature student doing stuff. I was just like, no, it's not really for me. But the thing is, I specialised in like Mesolithic hunter-gatherer societies. So that was kind of something, and I had a real privilege to work on the oldest house they ever found in Britain, which was like 8,500 years old.
Wow, so where's that?
So I was up in a place called Craster, so right on the coast, like up in Northumbria.
Right.
So we kind of, you had like the original hearth, you had post holes, and the amount of like, you had like shell middens from behind. So shell middens where like they'll eat an oyster and then just chuck it over their shoulder. So you get that kind of build up of stuff, but also loads of flint tools. And the thing is, being a like 20-year-old surfer dude, it was great because every time we finished like kind of for lunch, there was a brilliant surf break out the front, so I'd just get out my surfboard. I kept it in the tent there, so that was quite a nice little thing. But I was like, these flint tools, and I pulled out some like, a Mesolithic toolkit is an amazing thing. Like all the different blades, stuff like that they had, and I was just like, I'd dig up a really good one, and I'd be like, put that in my pocket because it's quite nice, and I've still got them. I think they're up on the shelf up there.
Well, so I mean, I saw an episode of Meat Eater on YouTube a little while ago, where they were using stone tools to butcher buffalo. And it's amazing how effective and sharp those flint tools are. And, they said that, they get blunt very quickly and you then have to spend 20 minutes putting a new edge on them.
Nap out a new one.
Yeah, but like to actually, they were amazed. They had these guys who are used to skinning and butchering big animals. And they said, well, the only real difference is that they're not as comfortable to hold. And you have to sharpen them more often, but otherwise they are every bit as effective as the knives that we use today.
But that's the thing, I mean, they're kind of, I think, freshly napped flint is more sharp than surgical steel. So it's like one of those things that actually, if you just smash out a new one, off you go.
Yeah.
But I knew that all these flint tools were going to go in a bag into a box and be forgotten about. And I was like, no, I want to keep some of that for me.
So at that point, you were already interested in that kind of primitive way of doing things, that very kind of ancient way of doing things. And were you also looking at, the cooking processes and techniques that they might have been using? Can you infer anything from an ancient hearth about how people might have been cooking? Or
well, that's the thing. You kind of start studying a lot of different, or looking into, when I realised that I was like, actually, I'm going down this route of cooking, hunting, shooting, foraging. You start looking into a lot of different things, and I mean, I kind of learned. So we did at the beginning. I mean, the first deer we ever butchered, we did with a friend of mine's, like from uni. His brother was getting married, and he was like, "Do you do stag groups?" I was like, and I only just started Hunter Gather Cook, and I was like, well, we could do. And we took apart a roe deer just with flint tools. So they had to nap out the flint tools first and then did it. It was an absolute shit show. I was just like, oh my God.
15 drunk guys trying not to slice their arteries open.
They drank quite a bit of cider. I was just like, at least they're not using knives. But that was the thing. So from there, you start kind of looking into a lot of different bits and pieces and fire cookery techniques. And I mean, I think we still do them, but underground ovens or umus, hangis, they're known as a lot of different names around the world.
So that's like a pit oven where you dig a big hole and then cover it over.
Yeah, so you basically dig a big hole. You want to use kind of igneous rocks, so granite, basalt, build a big fire, put the rocks on, let the weight of the rocks kind of sink your fire down, and then basically you flick water over it, and if the water instantly evaporates, that's when you like, okay, we're at the right heat point. Then put your meat on, wrapped usually in palm leaves, where I learnt how to do it. Good story actually about how I basically, me and my friend who were travelling when we were like 18, went to Fiji, spent like a month there, did a lot of surfing and just not a lot else. I met a guy on one of the islands we're staying on, and he was like, "Oh, I'm on holiday." He was like Fijian dude, and he was like, "Yeah, do you want to come and stay in my village?"
Oh wow!
And I was like, "We're like, you know, when you're a bit
Uncertain."
I'm not sure, but yeah, he was a nice guy, and what's he called? Tameli. I still remember his name. I was like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." And so we went and hung out with them up there, and they said to us one night, they were like, "Oh, do you want us to do like an imu?" And I was like, "Well, what's that?" And he was like, "Well, and they have like pigs, chickens, everything running around." And we were kind of quite far up in the highlands of Fiji. And he was like, "Oh yeah, well, we'll basically kill a pig and we'll show you how to do it." And it was amazing to kind of learn that technique, because I was like, I've never seen that before. So obviously you collect these different fire experiences, and especially kind of what you see now, it's like, if you're in the countryside, you can do anything. Like, you can really kind of
If you've got the space.
Yeah. Whereas if you're in central London, you're cooking over fire, it's not the same thing.
But I do feel like there is, it felt for a long time like, restaurant cooking was very focused on, sous videing things and making foams and purees and that kind of thing. But I feel like maybe, and I'm sure it's all cyclical, that there is a bit more interest in cooking with naked flame and that kind of thing. You see more restaurants that have got like a charcoal grill in the kitchen and that kind of thing. So do you think that is my instinct on that right, that there is a sort of increased interest in some of these techniques compared to, say, 10 years ago?
I think so. I mean, fire cookery has become huge, like, over the years, like over the last 10 years. It's just kind of, whereas when we started, like, well, I think we're almost in 2011 we started. So, but if you're going to build a kitchen in the middle of the woods, you're like, what's my option? Cooking over fire. And I've always loved cooking over fire. So it's a gradual kind of process of going, okay, well, how can you make it better? And like, I always thought, if you put a sausage on the grill, it rolls off into the fire, you're like, that's gone. Actually, that sausage will probably taste better than the ones on the grill, because you're getting that direct contact, which is what we refer to as dirty cooking, which is, and I remember when I first kind of came across that, I was like, that's actually really good. And then you start using like sieves to cook vegetables over coals, things like that, slapping stuff straight on, and you start to kind of really play around with ideas, and you kind of get stuff from everywhere. I mean, I'm not going to do what's that. There's a crazy Vietnamese guy who basically just has he kind of cooks like with a blowtorch and then dips his hands in cold water and turns everything over.
Crikey.
I was just like, you're like, okay, that's
quite extreme.
Yeah, that's it's a bit full on. But that's the thing, it's kind of, I think with fire cookery, there is no end to it. You never stop learning.
There's always a new technique. There's always a new thing to try, a new ingredient or whatever, and you're just trying new things.
But then you've also got, like, we're very lucky that we have a lot of tools to play with. Why hasn't Dan said it? He's meant to be.
Well, okay,
let's bring
right.
in Dan.
So the reason I've come all this way is because we're not just here to talk about cooking with fire. We're going to do some. So to that end, Weber have kindly provided us with a bit of kit to use. And with us, we have somebody whose voice is going to be familiar to people who've listened to previous series of the Guns on Pegs podcast. And that voice is Dan Cooper, head Grillmaster at Weber. So welcome, Dan. It's good to actually record with you in person rather than down the internet.
That's quite a title.
Thanks for having me, George. Yeah, and great to be here, Nick. And just say, obviously, been followed, for about many years now, what you've been up to, and I'm really excited to come and see this place in person and have a chat. It's great. So thank you.
So what bit of kit have you brought down?
Okay, well, we're going to start, I think, just really where the whole Weber story started. So with a lovely 57 centimeter kettle barbecue. So I suppose for people that don't know what a kettle barbecue is, but it's the classic sort of sphere. You've got a lid and a bowl and a sort of tripod leg setup, and it's where Weber as a company really started. That was the first product back in 1952. A chap called George Stephen, who was working for an engineering company called Weber Brothers in Chicago. He took one home. He was working for the company. They were making these metal yachting buoys, or buoys as they call them in America.
Oh, okay. So that hence the...
Well, exactly. So that's what they were making. And he took one home thinking he was going to make a barbecue out of it. And this thing really captured people's imagination because he was using air vents on the lid and at the bottom and able to control the oxygen. Whereas before he'd been cooking on a big open sort of half oil drum style grill. And this thing really kind of captured people's imaginations, really to the point where he had a little sideline making them, and then eventually he managed to raise the funds to buy Weber Brothers Engineering, and he turned the production from spherical shipping buoys to barbecues.
I did not know that.
No, nor did I. That's such a cool story.
That is fact of the day.
Yeah, I love that. So obviously we've spoken before on the podcast about some of the more high-tech bits of kit that Weber do. We've spoken about the smoke fire, for example, and I've got one of your excellent gas travel barbecues, the Traveller. They're great. But we're kind of really we're not going quite back to some of the primitive techniques that we've been talking about before, but as far as Weber barbecues go, this is as sort of... grassroots as it gets then in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great, as I always say, no matter what your kind of aspirations are in terms of acquiring a big fancy barbecue, it's always good to learn that fire control in a kettle, because it's so well thought out, and it's tried. The design's hardly changed, and all the great barbecue chefs that I've had the privilege of talking to, so many of them say, the Weber kettle is just the best starting point.
And that's the difference between, your standard tray of coals with a grill over the top and a Weber kettle. Well, there's two things, right? One is the fact that it has a lid altogether, and the other is the ability to control the temperature through and the speed at which the fire burns through the vents and that kind of thing. That's what makes a difference.
Yeah, exactly. So the using the grill in its entirety, the lid is really part of it. Lid on cooking will help reduce the oxygen flow, so stop those flare-ups from happening, keep all the flavour in the cook box, so you're getting better taste, and also it helps to cook your food through economically. So you're using it as an oven and a grill. It's knowing, indirect, direct, all that.
And so I think that a lot of people listening, I think there is a connection, as we've discussed, between the desire to go out and source your own protein through hunting and fishing and shooting, and also the desire to cook that in as naturalistic, I guess, way as possible. But I also think, and I speak from painful personal experience, it is quite easy to get wrong when it comes to cooking game, particularly on a barbecue. So given that I've got two genuine experts with me,
maybe Dan.
What are the big mistakes that people make? Go on, Nick, you go first, and then Dan, you can jump in.
I think when it comes to game, you've always got to worry about fat content, and that is the endless battle with it. I like to do, personally for myself, just venison, raw, like a tartare, or something like that, or doing tataki, like a Japanese style of it, is a wonderful way of really appreciating it. And you don't have to worry about the cooking element. But then when it comes to pheasant, partridge, anything like that, partridge I think I find it's a lot easier to work with, because it's not as gamey as pheasant. And you can, and it's quite a small morsel of something, so you can really kind of get the most out of it. With pheasant, you might get, we had a guy who works here, a guy called Lee, wonderful Dorset chap. When you take apart pheasant, if you're skinning it out, or whatever, you get that kind of orange fat on them.
Yeah.
Sorry, yellow fat on them, which he referred to as, and on courses with people, like 25 people here, and he's like, all right, so this thing here, like this, you can see this yellow stuff, this is pheasant fat, we call it bum custard. I was like, Jesus, Lee, come on. Like...
Yeah, it's not great tasting, is it, that?
But that's the thing. That's the only fat content you're getting from that animal. Yes. And especially when we're dealing with like fallow deer, stuff like that, any kind of fat content you can get, whether it's from like the suet, from around the kidneys, you just take it all. Like, and that's why like autumn is a really good time when you start getting that build up of fat on the deer. You're like, right, we can use this.
So a lot of people listening are going to have a deep freeze that is, to a certain extent, full of last season's pheasant, partridge, that kind of thing. So maybe, Dan, you could give us a whole pheasant. What's the technique to make sure that comes out as good as possible if you're cooking it on the barbecue? Because everybody needs to empty their freezer before the shooting season starts again. So what would you be doing if I presented you with a whole pheasant from last season? It's been in the freezer for a few months, so it might not be in the best possible condition. But what would you be doing?
Well, I think cooking a whole pheasant is tricky, obviously, because the legs and the breast cook at slightly different rates. So sometimes I would sort of, separate them and deal with the breast meat differently to the leg meat. But if you're cooking it whole, I think, the temptation is to, especially with a barbecue, is add as much as much fuel to get really high searing temperatures. But I think you need to just calm it down a little bit, not too much heat. And like Nick said, like lots of fat. I mean, it's really tricky to pluck a whole pheasant really neatly with all the skin intact, like roasting a chicken. So I sometimes cook my pheasant sort of the reverse way. So breast side down, loads of butter and sort of sage inside, and cook it a bit more gently if you're doing it whole. But I do really like to do a kind of confit on the legs, cook them with a lot of fat almost. But again,
so maybe
gently,
take the legs off and leave the breast on the crown.
Exactly. So generally speaking, I'd cook the legs really slowly in a kind of Dutch oven with lots of duck fat, but at a lower temperature, and then just a real sear on the breast meat, almost leaving a little bit of blush in the middle.
Oh right, okay, yeah, nice. So that just keeps it a bit juicy.
But that's the thing. Ducks are the only ones that give us fat in the game world. You're like, we buy like tubs of fat from they're called Mr. Duck. Get off Amazon.
Amazing.
But keep mopping and basting and keep that meat kind of.
What about brining? Would you brine a pheasant or?
Yeah, I think brining is a wonderful way of bringing flavour and helping you to maximise on moisture content on your sort of finished product. So definitely brining, and that's whether you're doing dry or wet brining, definitely longer the better.
Very nice. Right. Well, all this talking about food has got me hungry. What are we going to cook today, Nick? What are we going to do?
So, it's a good story behind this, which I think I told you about earlier on.
It'll bear repeating, I think.
We're going to do what we call land, sea, air, which was something, again, my good friend Dave, who works at Hunter Gather Cook, he was like, oh, have you done this McDonald's hack before? And I was like, what is it? I was like, I've never heard of McDonald's hacks. And he was like, well, basically, you get a fillet of fish burger, and then you get chicken mayo, and then you get a cheeseburger, and you put them all together and eat it. Land,
wow. Okay,
sea,
so
air.
it's like that's like a fast food surf and turf.
Exactly. So I kind of like when I first, most people do like a bit of McDonald's. I don't mind a Macca's. It's like when you get people that are vehemently like, no, why are you Hunter Gather Cook eating? I did see actually when I first met you, we were on our way back from River Cottage after doing a demo, and me and one of my guys, both wearing Hunter Gather Cook branded T-shirts, went into McDonald's and like and we were like ordering stuff, and this guy came and tapped me on the shoulder. He was just like, all right. He's like, I'll follow you on Instagram. Just seen you at River Cottage. What are you doing here? I was like, I just looked at him. I just went, same thing as you. And he kind of, I
He
did
shrank back.
But I did a post of like being at River Cottage, and I was like, wonderful weekend, and it was great fun. And he commented on the post just saying, great to meet you under the arches. So this idea of going, okay, well, how can we combine, like, I mean, I was like, I want to put this land, sea, air thing together. And you could do it like venison, and then you've got, I mean, I think fish and meat together as a thing, maybe not so much. So we kind of was like working on it, and we're like, okay, well, we could do like a back haunch cut of venison, and then we could use a sheet of nori. There's the sea, and then the air would be like pheasant or pigeon, and all of these things work beautifully together.
So for people who don't know, nori is the sort of seaweed sheets that you use in sushi and that kind of thing.
But it's taken like development. This is literally a dish that we've only been playing with for, I'd say, the last 3 weeks.
Oh wow! So it's a new thing.
And we changed it up. Like, so when we were at Black Deer Festival the other week, we did it with venison, pheasant, and then we did the nori sheets, but we did them like on the inside rather than on the outside. But you wrap the whole thing in pancetta.
Right.
Which is what we're doing today. So literally at the weekend, the guys were like, because we always sit down and have like a morning briefing and go, okay, these are the dishes we're doing. What do you want to do? What's fresh in the garden? What we're going to use with them? We order in a certain amount of other things, but it's like, okay, well, how do we do it? And one of the guys turned around, like obviously, clearly a chefy chef. Chops, my right-hand man, was like, he was like, well, no, put the pancetta down, then put the nori down, then put everything else in. Like, and I was like, that makes more sense.
From a structural perspective, I guess, as much as anything else, yeah.
But also from how it looks. Like,
so what version have we got today then?
So essentially what we're doing is we're going to be laying down pancetta first, nori, then we're going to flatten out some pheasant breasts, and then we're going to put inside of that, we're going to put the rabbit breasts, we're going to put some...
Oh, rabbit?
Yeah.
I didn't catch that before. That's cool. Very nice.
Land, sea, yeah.
Yes.
Then we're going to put down, because rabbit, like the rabbit's best friends, sage and mustard. So we're going to put a little bit of that in there, and I'm going to roll the whole thing up. And then, but the thing is, you don't need to do much seasoning with it, because you got your pancetta,
which is salty,
your nori, nice and salty, quite umami. So put those things all together, and we're going to basically cook it like a tornado on the grill.
So again, I'm going to ask you to explain what a tornado is.
It's basically it's like a meaty beef Wellington without the pastry.
So it's sort of rolled up, kind of like maybe like a burrito, but without the tortilla wrap outside it. So it's a sort of like a big sausage.
Exactly that. So I think my globe artichoke might be running out of water. So I cut it out. Dan, do you mind going and checking on it?
This is live cooking, people.
I just suddenly heard a...
Well, I mean, I think...
But that's the thing. So it's basically a cylindrical thing. We'll grill it off, and then we'll basically slice it into kind of nice little rounds, and then we'll just serve that up with some lovely bits. I think we'll do maybe some potatoes with it. We've got, well, Dan's sorting out the globe artichoke at the moment. That's more a snacky thing. And then kind of whatever veg is good in the garden.
Well, so I was going to say, the thing that we've not talked about is the pretty extensive garden you've got out the back of the barn here as well. So what are you growing in there? Is it all herbs and whatnot for? Oh, yeah, you've got other ingredients in the veg and stuff.
We do. We've got. We just started working with some new guys who called Shrub Provisions, which are based kind of like in Brighton. And
Right.
they're brilliant. They go around and check out all these different farms, and they basically collate everything. And so we're about to start working with them, and hopefully, but they only deliver on Tuesdays and Fridays. And it's like, no, like not just instantly.
Yeah.
But you do kind of go through suppliers and you find the best ones that work for you. Otherwise, we do kind of, like with the garden, we don't grow things like potatoes, although the pink fir apples we put in. And we're always trying stuff with the beds. So, I mean, we're not professional gardeners. Like, I've always enjoyed it. And I remember when I was living in London and we had like a window box thing we did, and we kind of grew stuff.
But I
in
mean,
that.
we've been out there. I mean, it's looking in pretty good shape, the garden. For someone who says he's not a professional, it looks pretty good out there. It looks pretty verdant.
Well, we're quite lazy gardeners, because the thing is that we found over there is we try things and we go, okay, that does well. Like beetroot, always banging, does really well. Courgettes always do really well. Very quite simple things to grow. The herb bed, so they're all kind of numbered, so 1 to 5. So bed number 1 is herbs. So we've got like our lemon verbena in there. We've got rosemary, sage, curry plant, which we haven't figured out what to do with yet. Wormwood, which we kind of use in cocktails, which is the primary ingredient in absinthe.
Yeah. No green fairies yet, though.
No, not yet. And then bed number 2 is kind of we change them over each year. So this year, I think that's kind of courgettes, salads, spinach. Then bed number 3, I'm not allowed to touch. That's my wife's cutting bed. So she does all the flower arranging here, and she kind of downplays herself, but she's actually really good at it. And she's kind of picked out like different things she wants to put in. But if I go near that, she always gives me shit because I put some mint in there at the very beginning, like 4 years ago. And it's just like, never put mint.
Never put it anywhere.
flower.
No,
Yeah.
it'll take over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then 4 and 5, we kind of switch up. Like 5 is like the winter bed, so that's got a lot of kale and stuff in like that. So that kind of comes into play later in the year. And I think 4's got beans and a lot of mint in it, and some beetroot and artichokes.
Interesting. So thinking about veg then, quickly, Dan, this is something that we've talked about before over the phone, but I think a lot of people, when you think of barbecuing, they tend to think protein. They tend to think sausages, burgers, steaks, that kind of thing. But actually, and maybe they, if they're feeling adventurous, they might put a corn on the cob on the barbecue. But there's so much other stuff that you can do with vegetables on the barbecue as well.
Yeah, and I always try and tell people, I see people sort of, when they're cooking vegetables, even on the barbecue, kind of painstakingly chopping loads of little pieces. And I actually like keeping vegetables almost whole when I grill them. So if you've got courgettes, just split them down the middle. If you're cooking onions, just simply skin it, put it on the grill. If you're cooking peppers, do it all whole, and you can chop it up later. But that's where you get like the flavour and the lovely sweetness and the smokiness. And I'm sure Nick's got a whole load of amazing recipes you do. But Exactly. So it's not like if you're kind of, cooking some little sort of rounds of carrot, you don't put that on the barbecue, it's not going to work. But if you put whole carrots on the barbecue and get some lovely colour on the outside, they will sort of steam themselves on the inside. Then you slice them up and drench them in butter and salt and chopped herbs. That's when the happiness starts.
I like to do sort of tender stem broccoli, just with a bit of olive oil and salt before it goes on. And you get this lovely kind of crackling noise I don't know what's going on. It must be water evaporating or something. And just that lovely char on it, and it goes incredibly sweet and a little bit peppery. It's lovely.
What's your favourite thing you've ever cooked on a barbecue, Dan? Come on.
Oh, I mean, that's a tricky question. There's so many different... I think I'd probably go to something like a really big flatfish, like a turbot or a big brill, just cooked over charcoal. Or I'm a sucker for a steak. I do love a big, lovely, dry-aged, lovely marbled Côte de Boeuf or something. So one of those two would certainly put a big smile on my face.
I wanted to ask you, Nick, what your favourite technique is of all the different styles of cooking with fire. Have you got a favourite one?
Really hard one. I mean, I think my favourite thing, it goes back to me being a kid first cooking over fire, is literally just having, just cutting out a square of turf or clearing an area, just making a little fire on the ground, and then just cooking a sausage over it or
on a
something
stick.
like that.
I've been doing that with my kids this summer.
What's it?
Just a bit of hazel with the point cut on the end and stick a sausage on it. And
But just being really, really simple with it. I mean, I've played around with all sorts of weird stuff. I put two grills, kind of wired them together and done it upright, and then we've got this wonderful thing.
so that's kind of like an
down
asado
here.
style is to do it like that, right?
Oh, you're gonna like this sound. So I'm just gonna get it out for you. So I did this as a wall of fire. Now I've been looking for
What is that?
for a long time, and you only have to look inside of it just to see how awesome it is. I mean, I'm a bit of an antique collector of random fire stuff, but it's a clockwork spit, so you wind it
Oh,
up.
so it's a wind-up spit. So what? How old is that? That looks like what, Victorian?
I'm not sure, but I mean, the noise alone.
Oh, that's great.
But the best thing is, when it's, so you wind it up, you probably want to hear that sound. So you wind it up, and then when it's finished unwinding, you then a little bell down here goes off. And it starts pinging on that. And
That's
basically
so cool.
says, done. So you put two spits, one here, one there, and then they just basically gradually turn. And we use this in the cookbook. And it's just it's designed to go in front of a wood burner or an open fire.
And there's a sort of a very
Just put it outside, it's quite loud.
There's a really nice kind of Heath Robinson element to quite a lot of this, though, which I love. So that's a great bit of kit, the rotisserie. But I remember one of the first Instagram posts of yours that I ever saw was your water-driven rotisserie. Is that something that you just thought that could work, or had you seen it somewhere before? How did you go? Because I can imagine if I tried to do it, I'd start full of confidence, and then I'd put the whole thing together, put the paddles in the water, and nothing would happen. So how much experimentation had to go on before that worked?
Not that much, because you've only got I think that is one of the things that I really enjoy about fire cookery is there's no end to what you can do. I mean, obviously you've got your kind of standardized stuff that is solid, like your Weber kettles, your big green eggs, all these different things, your Gosleys. But I think playing around with actually doing it as nature intended and how we used to do it for thousands of years is a really kind of fun thing to play with. And I think the water wheel thing, I think I did see, years ago, I think I saw it on YouTube, and it was just someone doing it with a chicken in South America. And they built a really simple thing with Coke cans as paddle wheels. Yeah. And I was just oh, I wonder if you could do a whole deer like that if you just made it bigger. And so I kind of was okay, well, let's just do this for fun. So I spoke to a load of the guys, Hunter Gather Cook, and I was like, let's go and have a weekend and do this. Be fun. I'll make it, and then we'll see if it works. And then my good friend Christian, also known as DJ Barbecue, was I was like, dude, do you want to come down and do this? And he was like, oh, he was doing a load of Jamie Oliver's food tube videos at the time, and he was like, oh, can we come and film it? And I was just like, yeah. And to this day, that video has got like something like 1.5 million views. I was like, God damn it!
Why isn't it my
it's on
video?
your YouTube channel, not mine. Don't really do YouTube stuff, but to this day, it's like his most popular video, and it was like it was a real kind of like, man, this probably could work because the amount of factors you got to like
with the speed of the water and
speed of the water,
the size
like,
of the paddle,
the depth of the river, and whether it's silty or whether it's there. And so it's like suddenly you're not thinking just about the fire. You're suddenly thinking about all the other elements and, wind direction and all that. So and that's what cooking with fire is about. It's not like you're kind of turning on a stove or turning on gas or something like that. You've got to think about so many different factors that are going to come into play. And I think that's what makes it quite exciting.
I couldn't agree more. And last winter I cooked Dan's venison chili recipe in my new cast iron cook pot over a tripod, and I'd put into YouTube how to make a tripod. And for the next 2 months, my entire YouTube suggestions feed was just mad sort of bushcraft video skills. And there's so many different techniques out there that I'm desperate to have a go at. But I am starving. I don't know about you guys. I think we should crack on and do some cooking. What do you think?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go make some food.
Right.
Got to do a bit of prep. But
let's do it.
We'll do it. Dan, you on potatoes?
Okay.
Peeling duty.
Love it.
Hasselbacks.
Oh, okay.
We're doing Hasselbacks.
Okay.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. I'm excited. Okay, so we've moved over into the kitchen area, and Dan is on potato duty. So Dan, just quickly, we're doing Hasselback potatoes.
Yeah, absolutely. Hasselbacks are great because if anyone listening isn't quite sure what they are, essentially you take a potato and cut very fine slices, but not all the way through. So when they cook, they slightly fan out and take in all the lovely oils and seasoning. I'm going to chop up some garlic and mix it with olive oil and salt and kind of marinate the potatoes in that.
Oh yeah, so this is the technique, right? You put it in a wooden spoon to make sure that you don't go all the way through the potato. Is that right?
So you need some sort of, I suppose, blocker, a device that will stop your knife sliding all the way through to make a cut all the way through. So a handle of a wooden spoon you're not particularly fond of is perfect. And you just look, I'll show you, here you go. I'm taking the potato, placing it sort of horizontally against the spoon, and then we just make loads of little cuts. You'll probably hear that. And then you just see that's sort of what you're after.
Okay, right. So we're going to leave Dan doing the potatoes. What are we going to do over here, Nick?
So we're about to start constructing the land, sea, air. So first off, we're going to put out a little bit of cling film because we're kind of doing it sushi style, but we just want to get it nice and tight.
So what you've got here, you've got some pheasant breasts. Skin still on.
They could actually be... I mean, I pulled them out of the freezer. Be honest, they kind of look more like partridge crowns.
This will be a situation that anybody who's got a freezer full of game is familiar with, which is you're not entirely certain what's in the
also, when
packet.
your staff don't write what it is.
Well, that says to me 5 times partridge crown. Part crown. So I reckon we got partridge. They look more partridge sized than pheasant sized to me.
I mean, to be honest, I've never actually done it with partridge. So partridge and rabbit, it's a new combination, but you can do it with any, even like deer, rabbit, deer, pheasant. So I think as long as you've got that air element and also the land element, and then with the nori, you've got your sea element. I think it works.
So Nick's just taking the breasts off the breastbone here, which is something that I'm sure everybody is familiar with doing. Is there any reason that you store them on the crown? Is that just because it gives you more options rather than taking them off the bone when you're preparing the birds in the first place? Yeah,
so I think cooking any birds like on the crown, like we always kind of tend to store them. Obviously, because we teach a lot of butchery down here, we kind of show them different techniques. But obviously, if you've got like up to 20 people here on a course, you're not going to be eating that many. So whatever we've got left, we do try to store things on the crown, because it just, if you're grilling stuff off, like over the open hearth, like there, which is where we do all the cooking, it kind of, you just get a much better flavour because your bones coming through. Then we pretty much everything that's left over bone-wise we'll use for stock. So potentially, once you've taken breasts off a crown, we've got stuff we can chuck straight in the hot pot.
Right, so coming back over to the potato station, Dan has very finely diced some garlic cloves, about half a dozen garlic cloves. And he's
about 8.
There you go, 8 garlic cloves.
A lot of garlic.
And then you sprinkled some rock salt over the top.
Yeah, a bit of salt, and then crush them down into a paste, and then we'll mix that with oil and just chuck that all over the potatoes. So they'll be super garlicky, really salty, and create a nice bit of...
You've got rosemary in the garlic.
Yes, we're going to hit it up with some herbs, definitely. I'm going to grab some rosemary. And again, really nice way just to, really accelerate the flavour and excitement of an ordinary new potato.
Fantastic. I'm very excited about this. The more you talk about it, the more excited I get.
That's
because
you're hungry.
I'm so hungry. I didn't have any breakfast this morning. So right now we've got the partridge breasts are off the bone, and so now we're going to start constructing. Is that right?
That is. So first of all, we're going to lay down a little roll of, or sheet of cling film, because this way we can actually get kind of like a really nice tight roll on it. That's what, because effectively what we're looking to do is make a sausage. So this allows us to get it really nice and tight. When we actually cook it, we'll be using a bit of butcher's twine. So we'll unravel it from the cling film once we've got a nice tight roll on it. Tie that up, and then from there we'll just grill it off and then just take off the bits.
Yeah, so what you're doing here, you're just laying some pancetta over the cling film, and this is going to sort of form the outside layer of our land, sea, air sausage.
Exactly that.
And so we want each rasher of pancetta to be slightly overlapping, I guess.
Exactly that. So we put them at a kind of like slightly diagonal, so we get a little bit more coverage as we go. But see, that's the thing. So this is where we're putting the fat content into the game. So, and you look at these are nice fatty slices.
Well, I'm going to leave you to that because it looks like you need to concentrate. But so Dan's just nipped out to the garden. What have you brought back in?
Lovely bit of fresh sage and some rosemary. And your beds look amazing.
Oh,
really nice. There's so much going on there. I, for some reason, am struggling to get my herbs to really kind of flourish like that. But anyway, very jealous. So yeah, just putting the nice thing about, Hasselbacks, you've got these little tiny slits in the potato, and you can feed little bits of sage in there.
Sort of squish it into the slot. Yeah, very nice.
Exactly, yeah, just to get the flavour in there. Just cut up a sage leaf and just put the odd bit in. So
very nice. Well, it's all coming together nicely.
But that's the thing is, I think that's quite fun about doing this kind of cooking, is that it could be nice and like quite anal about the preparation of it. And you're like, okay, we'll do this. And then you've got the side of the fire cookery.
Yeah, this is quite a fancy technique, right? This isn't just your standard whacking a lump of meat on the grill, which is a perfectly acceptable way of doing it. But this is a little bit fancier. So this would be like, if you've got a few friends coming over and you want to do something that's going to give a bit of a wow factor.
I don't know if I'd cook this for friends. I'd be like, no, we're having burgers tonight. But I think that's the thing is like especially when you've got like people on like a course, you kind of want to show them things that they wouldn't normally do at home.
So Nick is now just layering the partridge breasts over the top of the pancetta in the opposite direction. Is that just for structure?
Mainly for structure. So you want have a bit of a fatty, or the fatter end of the fillet, or the breast fillet, to one side, and then you want to have the thinner end in the middle, because that way you're going to get kind of better.
You get a kind of even amount of meat all the way through.
That's it. And then we're now going to layer in our rabbit.
So that's just going in on top of the pheasant.
Yeah. So then we're laying that partridge.
Partridge. I apologise.
It kind of reminds me of one of those sort of 5 bird roasts or 10 bird roasts that you
like a turducken.
Yeah, exactly.
They're quite fun to do.
Are they? I bet. Yeah.
Have you not done one?
I have. I've done one with that finished off with a turkey for Christmas once. But they're kind of quite like traditional old English recipes, and I think sometimes we forget, or a lot of people forget what it was like before an electric oven, right? And a lot of these techniques they must have come from somewhere. The way that people's hearths and stoves were set up.
So Nick has just spotted the deliberate mistake, which is he missed off the nori sheets. So we're just gonna reverse, and so we removed the partridge and rabbit from the pancetta, and we are going to put down one sheet, 2 sheets.
Just the one sheet.
Just the one sheet of nori.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. This is live cooking. Mistakes get made. Right, so the nori's going on.
Start again now.
But this feels like a recipe that will work really well because you can use pretty much whatever you want. It doesn't matter what you've got in the freezer. You can kind of adapt this to whatever happens to be kicking about.
Well, this thing, but we do find whenever we're doing kind of courses, stuff like that, we try to kind of keep as seasonal as possible. So we won't, for example, use things like pheasant, partridge during summer. But for little things like this, of course, because it's in the freezer. Like if you're at home, you wouldn't necessarily go, oh, hang on, that's not in season, so I'm not going to use it. But we try to just be as seasonal as possible with everything we use. So very much in the summer, we're using a lot of rabbit, a lot of pigeon. But, if you've got it in your freezer, use it.
And does all the game that you use, does that come from the estate, or do you have to go elsewhere for it?
Absolutely. Every single piece of pheasant, partridge, all of our rabbit tends to come from Glynde, like Glynde Estate, which is where I live, just kind of over the road. But all of our partridge, pheasant, all come from Firle Estate. So we actually kind of we have over the barn a drive called Shepherd's. This is Shepherd's Barn, and they basically beat the birds out of the cover crop up there. We've got 8 guns about 20 metres back from our walled garden lined up across there, and it's really good actually to have people on a course that have never seen like a shoot before and experienced all of that. We make sure they stay inside the barn and just watch from out of it, because you occasionally get your old boy who might go for a low pheasant, and it's a little bit like, okay. And literally, all the birds, the lovely thing about it is that all the birds that they shoot on this drive, we then walk out, go up to the game cart and just go through them and fondle them, make sure legs are intact, and they go straight in the chiller there.
So that's very low food miles. It's more food meters.
Food meters, definitely. So that's the thing that's great about it, and kind of we get to know all the beaters and the gamekeepers.
So Dan, your potatoes have gone on the grill, or
I've already put them in. Yeah, so it's one of those things that if I'm planning on cooking, more than just the meat element on my barbecue, I'm always thinking about timings. Most veggies are a bit quicker than your meats, but potatoes are great because you can actually cook them. And you can even take them off if they're kind of ready. They're gonna hold really well. You can heat them back up again. So the potatoes have gone in. I reckon they're going to take about 30 minutes. The grill's really nice and hot. We're cooking with lumpwood charcoal, so around 220 degrees.
So are they gone directly on the grill, or are they in a container of some sort? I'm sure we'll go and have a look in a minute. But
indirect in a nice little roasting dish. So indirect, which is where you have the heat to one side, banked to one side, lid down. All that lovely hot air and flavour is circulating, so it's roasting, really. Yeah.
Right. Nick has been out to the garden. He, too, has got some sage. So sage is going to feature strongly in today's lunch. So we've got a little layer of mustard gone on there. Some excitable dogs. And then you're just layering, the final layer, I guess, is some sage leaves. Being very carefully.
We've gone for, French's mustard. So, as anyone who's like a barbecue fanatic, using French's mustard in most things. I'm more classic. I prefer a Dijon.
That little bit of extra kick.
Yeah, even a bit of Englishes. Right, this is the complicated bit. This is where I might screw it up, but we'll see.
So the technique here is to use the cling film to help you fold over the first sort of roll, I guess, and then you're just with a little bit of swearing.
It's basically like, I'm not swearing. Very clean now, George. Come on. That's it. So once you've got that off, it's just about just like making sushi, but with meat.
Well, I was going to say, it looks like the trickiest bit, it's a bit like rolling a cigarette, which is getting that first tuck underneath.
Exactly.
And then once you've got that first layer of pancetta tucked underneath, the rest of it kind of does itself.
Well, I see. So now we're just going to roll that up like that, so it becomes a nice tight sausage.
So what you've done there is you sort of twizzled the ends to sort of tighten up the cling film.
Before we grill it, we're going to tie it up with a bit of string.
Gotcha.
So we've got our butcher's string there.
Right, so what Nick's doing now, he's just using a bit of butcher's twine to bind the whole sea, sky, land. Have I got that the right way around? Land, sky, sea.
Land, sea, air.
Land, sea, air. Got there in the end. Sausage together. And that just prevents it from collapsing during the cook, I guess.
Yes, we just kind of use the cling film more as a kind of sushi rolling mat. Now, obviously you don't want to cook it with cling film on. So we're just tying it up. We've unravelled it once we've got it nice and tight. And then we're just going to cover it over with a few bits of butcher's twine. And then it's going to go straight on the grill.
Is it going direct heat for this, or...?
So what we'll probably do is we'll do indirect for a bit. So we're going to have our coals on one side. And we're just going to allow it a bit of time to kind of cook through. Because bear in mind, we've got a lot of kind of uncooked meat in there. So we're just going to allow that to gently cook through. And then we'll finish it off on direct.
That makes sense.
And we're using the lovely ash charcoal we got today from my very good friend who works here, which is from Whitland Flame. It's very kind of artisan charcoal. So it's particular stuff. But we dabble. We use a bit of Weber, use a bit of this, use a bit of that.
We haven't really talked about fuel, but very quickly, I mean, what would the one piece of advice you'd give people about what charcoal to buy? Does it make a difference?
Massively. Don't buy stuff from if you go to a petrol station, it'd be full of
fillers and binders, and it's a grey area as well because often ingredients lists don't need to be stated on charcoal, so you could be buying something that's mineral coal based, or you could be buying something that's wood based, and you're not always sure. So, yeah, it's an ingredient, right? It's an ingredient in the
exactly,
dish.
And it's got a massive part to it. But it's buy whatever you can afford and what's most local to you.
Makes sense. And what about lumpwood versus briquettes, or any particular special uses for those? Or
well, generally, I mean, if you're using high quality charcoal briquettes, so pure charcoal, they because of their sort of compressed nature, they'll last for a long time. Lumpwood charcoal tends to burn out a little quicker. But so generally speaking, when we're roasting, I use briquettes and grilling lumpwood charcoal.
Right, so are we ready to head out to the grill then? As you can probably hear, we've come outside to the grill where everything is cooking. This is just on a standard Weber kettle barbecue. Let's see if we can get a little sound of that sizzle. So what Nick's done is he's just popped the sausage that we've just made, for want of a better term, onto one side of the grill, which is away from where the heat source is. So the charcoal is piled up on the left-hand side from where I'm looking at it, and the sausage and the spuds are on the other side of the grill. We've got the lid on and the air holes fully open, and there's plenty of heat coming off there. I'm standing about a yard away, and I can feel it there. We're in the sunshine, and now it's just a question of waiting, isn't it, Dan?
It is, yeah. It's a really nice idea. I've not seen game cooked quite like this before, but it's definitely something I want to try at home. And I think if you've got any kind of barbecue, you can recreate these kind of dishes with whatever kind of grill you have, be it a gas grill, a charcoal barbecue, or an electric grill, or whatever you have. So yeah, I think the message is definitely use your game and use it on the grill.
Yeah, and so I mean, this is the hardest bit of any barbecue, which is waiting. So we are just going to, I think we'll just enjoy the sunshine while this cooks. Right, we're having a look. Oh wow, that's really coloured up quite quickly, hasn't it?
Yeah.
See, that's the thing, the beauty of indirect, is that you can kind of use like these like a Weber kettle as an oven. So you kind of getting that smoky flavour into it, and you're also kind of, it's not like searing off, which will do, and you can see that pancetta's getting pretty good. I might have to get the temp pen out, check it out, see where we're at. But I reckon what we're looking for is 65 on that, and we could pull off at 60, and then we'll wrap it, rest it.
Sounds good. I'm excited.
Bit of veg.
Ooh, what have we got going on there? A bit of asparagus.
Bit of asparagus, bit of olive oil, bit of lovely molten salt, and then give it a squeeze of lemon at the end.
And that's just in a metal sieve, and you've plonked that straight on the grate.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So cooking with like sieves, it's great because you get that direct smoky flavour coming through. Like with a saucepan, you don't get that.
Yeah.
If you put it on a barbecue, whereas with a sieve, you get all of that coming through. I did see a cool reel the other day where they did like egg in it, like scrambled egg or something, and they got this so hot that you could just, and it didn't run through.
No way.
That's a very clever idea.
But then they used chopsticks to like kind of
Oh, wow.
swirl it round like that, and I was just like, there's so much wank there, that looks amazing. Haven't tried it yet.
But it just goes to show that the possibilities with fire cooking are pretty much infinite if you've got a bit of imagination and you're prepared to try things.
Well, that's the thing, and it's like, it's really, I
Give it
think
a little shuffle again. Sorry.
it's really important to like play around with these things and go, you know what, actually, yeah, you're gonna have like I think you only get success from failure. If you try
Very
something
true.
and it doesn't work, you're like, okay, well, how can I make that better or make it work? So it's like really good fun to play around with, and I mean, you know, with fire, it is that one of those things that you kind of, there's infinite possibilities. It can go from like 0 to 100, and it's like, what point do you hit it?
And it's almost a bit like, so I make sloe gin every year, and people often ask me for my recipe, and I have to tell them I don't really know what it is, because it's never the same twice. It's sort of vaguely, it's sort of done by eye, and some years it comes out great, and some years it's not so good, and it's
Never
the
tell
same.
them.
Yeah, well, I couldn't even if I wanted to. But it's the same, right? Your fire is never going to be exactly the same. Your meat's always going to be different, so you're always going to end up with slightly different results, and you might never not quite know what it was you did right or wrong that made all the difference.
I think that's the thing with more long-term stuff, like when we do a lot of pickling and fermentation. So whatever thing I do down here, in that terms, I'm like, I write down how I've done it, and then if it turns out well, I'm like, cool, follow that recipe again. If it doesn't work out, then you go, okay, that one didn't work. But that's the nature of experimentation. I'm going, okay, well, this might work, that might not. But, you know, if you don't push forward, you're never going to get anywhere.
Very true. Well, it smells absolutely incredible. Right, so this is the moment. We've got a bit of tin foil.
So we're going to take this off. I don't think, actually, there we go, damn with claws, that's licking. That we actually haven't hit that with any direct heat. So we're just going to put that in some tin foil, rest it for about 5 minutes. We're hitting about 60 now on that. So just leave that. Everything else looking pretty fruity. I'm going to smash some lemon juice on that as well.
That's on the asparagus, yeah?
On the asparagus.
Look at that.
These two are just like...
They know something good's happening.
But I could smell what you're cooking. I think Bombadou should be pretty hot.
Okay, so this is the bit that's intrigued me, because I've never seen something like this before. So all the while that the the food has been on the grate, there's been, well, I don't quite know how to describe it. It's a sort of a hollow cone.
It basically, the best way of describing it is it looks like a candle snuffer.
That's a very good way of describing it. So it's a hollow cone made of iron, steel, on a long stick, upside down, on a long stick, and you've had that directly in the coals heating it up. So what's the plan with this?
The idea is you get it really red hot. So obviously with things like game, you don't get too much fat content. So the idea with that is we're going to add in, so we've got some lovely beef suet. We're going to stick into that, and it will just, because that thing is so hot, it's liquidise and just drip liquid fat over it.
So we're basically going to baste the meat in meat fat. That sounds amazing. Right, we've been resting the sausage for 5-10 minutes, something like that, wrapped in cling film. And it's just come up to temperature, which is 65 degrees in the middle.
That's tin foil.
What did I say? Cling film. I meant tin foil.
But it's holding its shape really well now because all the protein's kind of set when you cook it. So it's a perfect sausage. It's the last one. Just slice it up.
What are we looking for here? Are we looking for thick slices or...
Go for, I mean, it's just 3 of us. Fat slices.
So then onto a lovely charred wood presentation board. We've got the sliced asparagus, which has been grilled. It's got a bit of lemon juice over the top, bit of salt, bit of olive oil. Dan has sliced our sausage. So the final, well, 2 final bits is the potatoes, which I think are just about to come off. Dan doing a little chef's taste there. Here comes Spuds. This is going to be the drizzling with the sort of flash melted beef fat. So here comes Nick with his torture implement. He's got a big lump of beef fat. It's going straight in the top.
Bit over your spuds. That's half them.
That is an extremely cool technique. And it's incredible how quickly that melts. I mean, that shows you how hot the thing is. Wow. Right, here we go. This is the moment of truth. You dropped a bit. It's quite hard to know. I think we probably go for the game first, don't we, Dan?
I reckon, yeah. 100%. Get in there.
So you got rabbit,
nori, pheasant.
Rabbit, no
partridge, pancetta.
And a bit of nori, bit of mustard, bit of sage. Finished off with the flambeau. So a load of beef fat on it.
I have to say that is really, really good. The sage is so nice with game, I think.
And the nori doesn't sort of stick out as being out of place. Do you know what I mean? It kind of does go with the flavour really well.
And I've got to get a bit of this pickled samphire as well, which is...
So it kind of adds like a little hint of umami and I suppose a bit of saltiness to it, but that's the sea element. I mean, we toyed with like going, oh, should we put fish in it as well? But I mean, that's taking it to another surf and turf like parallel, if you like. Going, okay, we could do that.
With the samphire, it just completely changes it. That's so good.
Well, I think so. Those are our sea elements.
Yeah.
But those pheasants were literally shot overhead from where we're sat, and it's glorious to hear the shot raining down on the roof.
Yeah.
I'm now going to have a go on one of Dan's Hasselback potatoes.
So much garlic. I like the way you've got the 2 dogs.
They're just waiting for me to drop some. Yeah.
Can smell something. They're just like doggy hoovers.
Right, so I don't think everybody needs to listen to us eating the whole lot. So I think what I'm going to say while I wait for my potato to cool down is, Nick, Dan, thank you ever so much. Dan, thank you for setting up. Nick, thank you for sharing your space and your expertise with us. It's been so interesting. I wish we could do this every time, to be honest with you. So thank you so much.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having both of you down here, and obviously Dan, who I met many years ago, like kind of hearing all the stuff about Weber and how they use them and the things you can do with them that I'm not necessarily familiar with, because I'm more of a feral fire cooking person. Whereas, if you're talking experts, Dan's definitely there.
Well, I think it's been a really great blend of feral and professional. I think it's great. So I'm going to leave everybody there. I'm going to say thank you ever so much to everyone for listening. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another episode. It will be another special episode, but I'm not going to tell you any more than that. But I will be on location somewhere, and Chris will be with me next time. But until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, George. Bye.
I'm going to get stuck in now.